Okay, our next speaker is here to talk about emotional intelligence and the irony of me introducing her. Please welcome Roberta.
Thank you. Yes, first I want to tell you my name is Roberta Moore. My husband's in the audience today, and his last name is Skank. I did not want to be Roberta Moore Skank for obvious reasons, so I kept my maiden name Roberta Moore. My company is named EQI Coach. I recently rebranded because first I named it More Relationships, and there weren't really any women that thought this, but too many men came up to me and thought it was a dating service. And I'm actually an executive coach. So there's been a recent name change. So today, it's my intention that when you leave here, you at least understand a little bit, if you remember nothing else about what I'm talking about today. I hope you understand why emotional intelligence can help you in your work life and also in your personal life. So I'm going to go over a little bit what the definition of it is. One model in particular, the EQI 2.0. I'm going to talk to you about irrational beliefs and how you can get emotionally triggered. And I'm going to give you a couple of things for your toolkit so how you can start building your skills today. So now just by a show of hands, how many of you have ever been in a conversation where emotions were tense, and things are getting high, and you blurted out something that later you came to regret because it worked against you? Maybe you got angry and you said something that could just never be taken back, or maybe it was inappropriate. So it looks like most people raise their hands. And by contrast, by a show of hands, how many of you have ever been in a meeting where you needed to speak up and voice your opinion? It was critical that you do so, yet you just sat there when it was your turn to talk. Not as many, but still a lot. So that's a bit about what emotional intelligence is. So who am I anyway? I started out my career as a CPA in public accounting, but along the way I became trained in marriage and family therapy as a psychotherapist, and what I started to notice was that people who might come to me, work people who would come to me with problems maybe in their relationship or with a offspring or maybe with parents, often what was going on in their personal life was also going on in their work life. So let's say if they had, trouble communicating about something at home, they may also have trouble communicating with direct reports or coworkers or team members at work. So I got very interested in how could we bring psychology into the workplace without there being a stigma. Because as you know, there's kind of a stigma of therapy or mental health. And emotional intelligence was the vehicle that I found to do that. So right now, I help executives and teams be more productive, profitable, and personally fulfilled. And I do this by one-on-one coaching or group coaching. I do audits and I do assessments with the tool that I'm going to tell you about today. So before I should tell you why you ought to care about emotional intelligence, I want to tell you why I care about emotional intelligence and why I am so passionate about it. Well, I said I started out in public accounting. Really, I started out in internal accounting for a company called Monsanto, which is now Bayer. And I was a young and fresh out of school. And I grew up in a family where my mother was, she was seriously off. And she was somebody, imagine if you're a child and you're criticized on a regular basis. Maybe not every day, but maybe 2 or 3 times a week you're told, you didn't do that right. You didn't clean up your room right. You made a mess on the floor. Oh, you don't look nice today. Why don't you go wash your face? And just think about what that might do to your psyche. You might just guess that as a result, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence as a young girl. And my coping method was to go to my room a lot and study like crazy to prove to myself that, because my mom called me dumb, to prove to myself that maybe I wasn't as dumb as my mother thought I was. So I was very sensitive to feedback by the time I got to Monsanto, and I was an internal auditor, and I was doing an audit, and the supervisor on that particular audit had a meeting with me, and he said, "Why did you take such a large sample size? You sure wasted a lot of time." And I thought I was being very thorough. But I remember I couldn't take feedback, even if it was, if it sounded critical, maybe it was constructive, I'm not sure. But I burst into tears. I was just about 20 or so. And I don't mean I had a little tear in my eye, I really cried. And this guy was probably about 50 and he didn't know what to do with me, so the meeting abruptly ended. Looking back on it, I kind of feel empathy for him, but at the time, I was in distress. And I think it was a Friday, and I went home, and then my main boss called me at home after work hours, and he kind of chewed me out on the phone. He said, "Why'd you do that to me, Roberta? You embarrassed me, because you work for me, but you cried in front of my colleague." So then that was kind of like a double criticism. I didn't have a very good weekend that weekend. When I discovered this tool of emotional intelligence, I was just thrilled to see how it could change my own life, and then how it could change other people's lives. I don't cry at work anymore, and I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you, I now score within the top 1% of people in North America for emotional intelligence. So if I can go from way low in the hole to in the top 1% of people in emotional intelligence, so can you. There is no difference between you and I. Anybody at any age can increase their emotional intelligence. So, by a show of hands, who's heard of EQ before? Excellent. Boy, lots of people. It's a savvy audience. Who's read a book about EQ? Who has already attended a workshop about EQ? Oh, wow. And has anybody worked with a coach yet on EQ? No, but a lot of people have already raised their hands, so an intelligent audience. Now again, why should you care? Well, if you're somebody that wants a promotion, if you want to make more money, if you want to have better health, if you want to have closer, better relationships with team members, with a boss, or with a direct report, or even your own family, I want you to know that that is all possible by raising your EQ. In fact, Time Magazine tells us that 90% of the top performers have high emotional intelligence. So that's a pretty remarkable statistic. What do you suppose EQ is anyway? I know it's kind of a buzzword out there these days, but the word motere in Latin means to move. It is the same root word in emotion and motivation. So the idea here is, without our emotions, we might not do much of anything. In fact, we might just sit around on a couch all day if we didn't have emotions. I'm going to ask you to think about what happens when you're at an airport and a flight is either delayed or canceled. Some people will behave calmly, but some people will be really angry. They might even start talking loudly and, might look like yelling. And if you're the flight personnel and you've got one seat left on the next flight out, who are you going to give it to? Are you going to give it to the person who's in your face screaming at you, or are you more inclined to give it to the person who's being understanding? I think you'd give it to the person who's being understanding. Aristotle is actually considered the father of emotional intelligence, and this is a really nice definition. It's being able to use your emotions in the right way and at the right time, with the right amount of tone in your voice, in the right situation. So people used to think that emotions were negative, but even anger can be a positive emotion according to Aristotle. And even he's trying to tell us that even anger can be used in an appropriate way with these factors. Another way to think about emotional intelligence is it's the intersection of head and heart. So if you had too much heart, I used to have too much heart. I used to be way overly emotional. Then you kind of might appear to be disorganized, because we really do need head logic in order to be organized and systematic in our thought processes. So what I'm attempting to share with you here is neither one is better or worse than the other. And in fact, it's the balance of the two that is really emotional intelligence. Another way I like to think about emotional intelligence is a card deck. Imagine a card deck. And that when you need to have an emotion and you want to play it well, like playing a card deck, then you would shuffle the cards like shuffling your emotions, and you'd decide, which card am I going to pick? Or which emotion am I going to use right now? Instead of that emotion picking you and having its way with you, which emotion do you want to pull out of that deck and use right now? Because you're going to come across as more emotionally intelligent if you do. Now, what's the business case for emotional intelligence? Like, again, why should you care about applying this to business? As I said before, in the past, in our culture, people used to think that emotions were bad. You know, there were Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, and Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. But, in fact, emotions can be viewed as bad if they're taken to an extreme. Think about what going postal means and where that expression going postal even came from. It's because somebody got angry in the post office and shot and killed a postal worker. So yes, extreme feelings can be dangerous. But Einstein, he was somebody that thought differently. He thought that emotions did have value, and we should not just make intellect our God. Bless you. So, is IQ responsible for our success at work? Who said no? Would you tell me why?
Well, because people are either really high IQ, usually either at the very top or at the very bottom.
Can you catch something? Because you're the first person to answer my question. Whoops, sorry. It's close. I guess I'm not a graceful thrower. I never played baseball. But this young lady said it's because people are either at the top or the bottom. And did you say next?
Because success, is either at the top or, the bottom, the lack of emotional intelligence is that either in charge or they don't.
She's got it. What's your name?
Melody.
Melody's tuned in. Because Melody said they don't rise. And the research that I have seen, and I've made this my life study at this point, so I do consider myself an expert on this subject, maybe not on other subjects, but at least on this one. IQ gets you the job in the first place. You have to have enough IQ to understand technology, for instance, or to understand how to make an Excel spreadsheet. But once you get that job, yes, I know in technology you get ongoing certifications as you build your repertoire in your toolbox, and I understand you might need one, like especially in cybersecurity applications. I have met several clients in cybersecurity, and they're always getting these certifications. Yet those that advance, the people that get the promotions, the people that get to the top, they're not the people that have the highest IQ. They're the people that are most emotionally intelligent. So Melody's right. In fact, in a study of 121 different Fortune 500 companies, looking at their competency models tell us, what do you need to be successful here at our company? Only 33% of the skills needed were intellectual ones, or about IQ. And a whopping 67% were about emotional intelligence. Also, if you're doing change management programs, you absolutely have to address emotions in addition to thought, or your program will not succeed. Here's some examples of probably companies you've heard of before that are applying the principles of emotional intelligence as we speak. And in a study, Dr. Stephen J. Stein, who owns MHS, Multi-Healthcare Systems Incorporated. He's done a lot of studying on this, on emotional intelligence, and he tells us it's the greatest predictor of your workplace success and personal excellence. So the idea is you want to also be success means you're going to be happy too in this model. If you're winning accolades at work but you're miserable, in this model you're not considered successful because if you're not happy, you have to have a good well-being. So if I'm making the case that if your company pays attention to EQ and people increase their EQs, you can have a very positively charged, highly motivated and engaged workplace. A place that's fun to go to work. A place that, is a positive culture instead of a toxic culture. And again, who wouldn't want that? Let's look at leadership and EQ. Did you know that emotions are contagious? Emotions are contagious. Just think about, sometimes we kind of in our society get mass hysteria. Whatever the flavor of the month is or the thing in the news, people kind of catch on it. So for instance, for a while my husband and I moved away from St. Louis and we went to the South. And I'm not saying I'm going to be speaking disparagingly about the South because I enjoyed my time in North and South Carolina. But I noticed, if you think people in St. Louis get hysterical about the weather, especially today, because it changed by about 50 degrees in a day or two, I just noticed something that was hard for me living in the South was if it rained a lot, people paid a lot of attention to the weather. And some people didn't even want to go out and drive just because it was raining. And one person would get, oh my gosh, the weather's bad. And I noticed it would spread like a contagion throughout the room. You could see it by the looks on people's faces. Well, why is that? It's because we have mirror neurons in our brain. Mirror neurons fire when we see somebody else doing something. It's kind of like why you yawn, and maybe if you're watching somebody who yawns, you might yawn too. It's because of those mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are very important when we're children because it's how we learn to relate to other people, and it's how we learn language processing skills. Well, it affects us at work too because research shows that when 3 or more people are together, the person who is the most emotionally expressive, so the person who shows their emotions instead of being stoic or having a poker face, that person is the one who communicates their emotions, like it changes the mood in the room, and the other 2 people, because of mirror neurons, they pick up that person's emotions. And leaders who are lively and very passionate, about their cause or about what they're doing, it shows, the research I've seen shows that within 5 minutes, the whole room, if a leader walks in like that, people in the room will start to feel or they'll adopt the mood of that leader. So here's a little tip. If you're going to facilitate a meeting or you're going to lead your team on some project, watch how your mood is and watch how you come across, because you're going to affect everybody on that team or everybody in that meeting. And I bet you'd rather have a positive meeting than a negative one. And why is that? Self-expression is responsible for 85% of our communication. It's nonverbal. So when we're delivering a message, people pay more attention to the look on your face, the tone of your voice, your body posture, then they do the actual words being said. So for example, if I said, boy, you did a great job on that project, would anybody really feel affirmed? Probably not, because I sound like I'm yelling or I sound like I'm criticizing. But if I say, oh my gosh, that was a job well done. You really made your point and you brought everybody on the team together, I'm probably going to be believed. And that's very important. So leaders who have higher emotional intelligence, they understand themselves better, and because of that, they communicate better. and they're more inspiring. And guess what? They understand other people better too. And by contrast, if you're tuned out to your own emotions, you don't even understand what emotion you're feeling in the moment that you're feeling it, chances are very good you're not going to understand, what somebody else on the team is feeling either. So how does mood affect job performance? And I was originally going to ask you guys to do this as a written exercise with a partner, but you're very spread out because the auditorium's pretty big. So I'm just going to ask instead, I wanted you to think about in your own mind, think about, you can go positive or negative. So either your most favorite boss, somebody who had the most influence over you, they could really influence you to go the extra mile, to stay late and finish a project on a deadline when you're tired and you'd rather go home. So somebody who is your favorite boss, either think of that person, or you can think of somebody the opposite, somebody that you hated working for. Hopefully you didn't hate them, but maybe you just did not like the experience of working for them. And maybe you even, did the bare minimum in your job just to get by. So I'm going to give you just a second. Please start thinking about that. And then if there's some courageous soul who can tell me either about the best boss or the worst boss, I'd be very interested. Yes. What is your name?
Corey.
Corey.
Yeah. So I would say the worst boss, having bosses who. I would say the worst boss, having bosses who kind of display a lack of trust or micromanage you, kind of come into the workplace with, so not necessarily, I guess it is their mood, coming into the workplace with kind of all eyes on you, displaying a lack of trust, breathing over your shoulder.
Okay, everybody heard that? So that's the worst boss. Can you tell me about the best boss?
So I worked at a restaurant for a long time, and it was like the worst restaurant in like the area, and it was like everybody hated it. This was one of the best bosses that I ever had because he would walk in and everybody would want to work, and everybody came to work for him.
Can you say, there you go. Can you tell us why everybody wanted to work for him?
He was just always in a great mood. He was always super positive, and that really influenced the entire staff that entire evening. And you would notice an incredible difference between when he would be at work and then when another manager would be at work. And I really genuinely think that people came there and wanted to work there for him, and not even necessarily, because like once he left, a lot of people left.
Interesting. Thank you. What was your name?
Carly.
Carly. Thank you, So Corey and Carly. Anybody else have a story they want to share? Yes, there in the back there. We'll wait for the microphone because Rebecca's very close. And what's your name, please?
My name is Sarah.
Sarah. Okay.
So I'll tell you a story about the best boss. I feel like she was very tuned in to her team, and she didn't handle all of us the same way. She would talk to us in a way that made us feel like she understood us and our individual contributions to a project, and not just necessarily treat everybody the same way.
Excellent. And we'll take one more right down here. Our first male opinion. Right?
Sure.
And it looks like your name is Daniel?
It is.
Okay.
So, to me, the best boss is not a boss. He's actually a leader. He actually inspires you. It's about a we. How do we do things? It's about what do you think? What's the best approach? It's about inspiring you to feel like you matter.
I love that.
A worst boss is someone that doesn't care about you, and it's about what you have to do to make me look good. It's also about what you're not doing that you should be doing, and I don't care what your problems are. So, huge difference.
Thank you, Daniel. So what did you notice about the qualities of the good bosses and the bad bosses? The next slide is going to give you the answer. Were any of the qualities of the good bosses or the bad bosses about IQ? I mean, did anybody talk about technical ability or IQ, how smart the boss, or nobody said he was really smart, he or she, or that he or she was not smart. Everybody talked about emotions. And this is actually a study, there was one of the studies among many, of what makes a good leader, what are the traits. And in this, only 2 have to do with IQ, and those are the first 2 on the list. People's competency and their intelligence, meaning intellectual capacity. And everything else on the list absolutely has to do with something emotional. So another thing about mood is, those of you who either have cats or dogs in the audience, and just raise your hand to answer the question, by a show of hands, who knows when their cat or dog is feeling happy or sad, excited or bored and depressed? So almost everybody. Did you know, because I did not know this until now, that when Darwin was studying and he wrote his first book about evolution, he was really studying emotions across species. And one of his things was that, you know, if a human being saw an angry wolf, what did they do? Like a wolf that looked angry, did they run away? So survival of the fittest and all that was really based on, his book was, in the name of his book had, you know, expression, emotional expression across the species. So emotions and the importance of those go way back. So, you know, what kind of leader would you rather be? A happy one or an angry one? And would you rather be a fairy godmother or a wicked witch? So how do you know what your EQ score is anyway? I kind of told you where mine is now. I didn't tell you where it used to be, but you could probably guess. There are different models. You may have heard of Daniel Goleman because he's very good at marketing himself. In his big book in 1995, What is Emotional Intelligence and Why It Matters, he was responsible, everybody kind of credits him with taking the idea mainstream. But, oh, you're shaking your head, Daniel. Do you have another thought? Yes, because Mayer and Salovey were 2 researchers at Yale. They'd been researching emotional intelligence, and they got together with a guy named Caruso, and they created an assessment type of tool called the Mesquite, M-S-C-E-I-T. And Dr. Reuben Bar-On, this is him right up there, Dr. Reuben Bar-On has been studying emotional intelligence since he wrote his dissertation for his PhD back in the 80s. And basically he was looking for the answer to those 2 questions. What makes people successful and what makes people happy? And he got together with this Dr. Stephen J. Stein, and together they came up with, I mean, Dr. Stein added the voluminous database. 2 million people have taken this assessment. So big voluminous database, and this is their logo, EQI 2.0, assess, predict, perform. It used to just be the EQI, but with the expanded knowledge of Dr. Stein, they were able to make this assessment tool gender-free and culture-neutral. So it's been used in 154 different countries, translated into over 33 different languages, and again, database of 2 million. I cannot talk to you about all skills in the model today. There's actually 16 EQ skills in this model, and it's different than a personality indicator, and this is critical. Research tend to think our personality is fixed at birth. You can vary a little bit, but you know, I also use assessments like the Myers-Briggs and DISC. This one's different because it's so hopeful. Anyone at any age, at any time, can change their emotional intelligence. And my understanding is that this has even been given in psychiatric wards and in in the hospitals, and even people that were schizophrenic could do the skill building exercise, their cognitive behavioral skills, and they could increase their emotional intelligence. So I love this. I mean, it's so hopeful. I narrowed it down to 3 skills today because I can't talk about, if I tried to talk about all skills, you guys would be bored. And I want to still give you a tool or 2 to take away. So I picked 3 today because these are what the Center for Creative Leadership says are important, as well as the MHS database. And I call it ACE. That leaders need, the top leaders are proficient at these 3 skills. Competence is really self-regard, but I wanted to make it say ACE. So assertiveness in this model, because it sounds better. Assertiveness in this model is not about aggression or passivity. It's about taking action. I'm proactive. I can take initiative. And guess what? I can also offer my opinion. So that example I gave you in the beginning about being in a meeting and not speaking up, that used to be me. So I had to work really hard on building my ability to stand up for myself and to state my opinion. Because I used to be too timid. What if I got the answer wrong? And I know I'm not all that different how I used to be from some other people, because, I hear people tell me that all the time, that they have that. Confidence is really, in this model, self-regard. And the idea would be, okay, I know I'm good at these skills on this hand, and I know I'm not so great at these skills on that hand. But you know what? Being good at these and knowing I need improvement over here, I still love and accept myself as I am. I can still take up for myself. So it's having a sense of confidence, even though you've got some things you could be better at. And empathy. Oh wow, empathy is my favorite of all the 16 skills. Because empathy is about your ability, or our ability, to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, see things from their point of view. You don't have to agree with them. You can still say, I don't agree with you. But you can say to that person, I understand why you might see it that way. And that makes people feel seen, heard, and understood. So the ladies in the previous presentation who were talking about planning the streets to have a better user experience, and they were saying that they worked a lot with relationships. This makes the biggest difference in relationships. And your assertiveness, you'd want it to be in balance with your empathy. I used to be low in, score lower in assertiveness and higher in empathy, and that wasn't so good either, because I was out of balance. I used to be very sensitive, too sensitive to a fault, to the needs of others, without being able to take up for myself. So in this model, you want to be balanced on all 3, and that's important. It makes a difference. When you take this particular assessment, you will get it's a 27-page report. This is just 1 page. I just put it up there. I don't expect you to read it. I just want you to see that there are different colored bars, and that the goal of this would be to have most of your bars line up without there being high highs. On this one there's high highs and low lows, like the blue lines at the bottom, or high high and low low. But if you look at the yellow in the center, those are about all equal. It's another reason why I love this tool. Now, if you're curious about your own EQ, you can look on my website. There's a free downloadable mini survey. It is not scientific by any means. Just get you thinking. This model I chose because it is the most scientifically valid and reliable model. Just like the mesquite is very reliable and valid, but it will tell me, and this happened once, and this is so hard when this happens. If somebody gives themselves, because this is self-rating, and last week somebody asked me, is that even valid? Yes. Why? The database is so big. And the report has built into the algorithms based on that large database. Is somebody self-reporting in an overly positive manner? Because if they are, the results are not valid. And are they overly negative? The results wouldn't be valid either. And I had somebody in my office report overly positive, and I had to tell that person, your answers may not be valid. And he was like, yes, they are. We went over them one by one. Yes, I did score that way. That's me. And I said, would you do me a favor? He said, what's that? Would you please take this home to your wife, and will you sit down and have a conversation with her? Will you ask her if she thinks you scored as high as you think you score in interpersonal relationships and empathy? Well, he came back and he said, well, my wife said I didn't, so I guess I got to work on myself. But it's very good that way. It's very dependable. If you want the 16 EQ skills and their definition so you can kind of work on them yourself, I've got my stuff out at the table by the DYI booth, Martha said, but it's in where all the sponsors are. I'm going to have my book there if you want to purchase a copy of my book. If you don't want to purchase anything, you can just give me your business card. I am going to have a free drawing, one person in this room. I'm going to give away an EQ assessment and a debrief with me, because I can't just throw the report at you. You have to understand what I'm giving. So if anybody wants that, you can put your business card in the little bowl that I have, or you can sign up. I also have handouts, the ABCDE method we're going to go over now, and I told you about the one giveaway. So I'm going to pick up the pace. I see I'm lagging a little bit. So learning EQ starts early. It starts when we're children. It does have to do with how our parents treat us. So imagine, let's say a little boy who's 5, and he asks, let's say there's 2 different mothers, 2 different little boys. Mother A, when the little boy says, Mom, will you read me a story? She says, yes, I'll read it to you at bedtime. Let's say she comes home and she reads, after work, and she reads the story to him at bedtime. And let's say this happens 5 nights in a row. That little boy is probably going to grow up optimistic. I mean, maybe not, but probably. He's predisposed to. Why? He's going to think, I asked Mom for what I want, and I get it. Now let's look at household B. Let's say this little boy asks his mom, Mom, will you read me a story? And she says, yes, when I come home from work. And Mom B comes home from work, and it's bedtime, but she doesn't read a story. And she says, well, I'll do it tomorrow. Same thing happens 5 days in a row. Little boy thinks Mom is coming home to read the story, but Mom doesn't read the story. Maybe Mom works 3 jobs. Maybe she's a single parent. Maybe she's exhausted. Or maybe she has some kind of an addiction problem. That boy B is a little bit predisposed to being pessimistic instead of optimistic. I ask for what I want, but I don't get it. So learning EQ can start very early. We have a conscious part of our mind and an unconscious part of our mind. The iceberg is supposed to be a metaphor for our mind here. Do you know that the unconscious part of our mind is like a sponge, a giant sponge? It soaks up everything we're learning when we're children. And we might make decisions like the little boy whose mom didn't read him the story. Maybe he decides, I'm not going to ask for what I want. It's not worth it. Why should I bother? And then let's say he makes that decision at age 5, and he does it over and over and over again. It's not just a one-time thing. And maybe he's 35 and he can't figure out why he's not being successful at work because he forgot he made that decision as a kid. Our behaviors are very governed by what's in that giant tape recorder in our unconscious mind. That's why you want to look at them. What's in your unconscious mind? Because if left alone, those stories will govern your existence and the quality of your life in ways in which you are unaware. Not to worry though, you can change that. This is our brain. You don't have to analyze this, but if you kind of make a fist with your hand, the amygdala is in the emotional aspect of the brain, and that's the fight or flight response. It's not very logical or rational. That's a response Darwin was studying. It evolved very early in our lives. We still have it today. So, in the past, if there were a saber-toothed tiger out in front of us, a very physical threat, the amygdala would fire and it would cause us to run like heck. Adrenaline, cortisol reaction, we could escape and we could stay alive. Today, We still have the amygdala, but we're no longer cave people. But it does not know the difference between an honest-to-goodness threat or something that's just like a deadline at work, an innocuous psychological threat. So you can't always trust it. We're going to skip that exercise because I want to get to the toolkit. So I want to use an example. What do you do about the amygdala? Because the amygdala is that part of our brain that when you're in that high, intensely emotional conversation, could come out and make you blurt something out to your boss that later you regret. You know, you could call him or her a name, and then maybe it's too late to take it back. So this is a true story. I work with a lot of people in cybersecurity, and one of my clients worked at the time, they don't now, she doesn't now, the night shift. It was a 12-hour shift, and her company didn't have enough people on the shift. There was a hiring freeze or something. She was the only one on this night shift. So this is going to be A, the activating event. 5 minutes, because we're doing A, B, C, D, E. 5 minutes, I guess, before her night shift ended, there was something, a potential threat. Her job was to guard the mainframe. There was some potential threat that she noticed, and it had to do with somebody on the West Coast, a senior level executive working on his computer for some kind of a deadline. But it was possible that this computer was contaminated, and she was thinking, do I need to shut him down, take him down to keep the mainframe safe? Well, of course, there was a procedure at her company. They have procedures for this. And the procedure is she's supposed to make a phone call to the manager, and the manager is supposed to figure out what to do. And I want to say this was like 3 in the morning or something like that. So she tries to call the first manager, no answer. There's a second manager going down the phone tree. She does call that person, no answer. And there's no more on the phone tree to call. She's faced with having to make this decision herself. And when she talks to, she's very capable, very IQ, very high. We worked together on her EQ. But anyway, she talked to this senior executive on the West Coast, told him she was going to have to quarantine his computer, take it off, I guess, the mainframe, and he got angry, started yelling at her, and threatened. I'm going to tell your boss what you did, blah, 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 blah. And she's a very sensitive individual. So B is the belief. What is her unconscious belief at that moment? Well, it turned out she has a lot of negative self-talk, just like I used to have. And she thought, oh my gosh, he is going to call my manager. What if I make the wrong decision? She thinks she's right, that she needs to take him down, but then she's like second-guessing herself. What if I make the wrong decision? What if I lose my job because this, senior level executive on the West Coast is working on this big, important deadline? And then what would be the consequences of this irrational thought pattern of hers? Remember, or maybe I didn't tell you yet, the amygdala always goes from 0 to 1,000 in a split second because it wants us to run away from the saber-toothed tiger that isn't really there. So it always, always, always goes to worst case scenario, right? Because she's thinking she's going to lose her job if she does what she thinks is the right thing. And her brain is emotionally flooded. This is this part of the brain, the frontal lobe, that gets flooded with these emotions. And it's hard to think rationally, but it's not impossible. You can learn, I promise you can learn to slow your thoughts down. These were the symptoms she was experiencing that she told me about. She was having a panic attack. So her heart was pumping fast, she was getting sweaty, she was shaking, actually. But she was alone, so no one saw that. But she did figure out to stop, and to take a deep breath, to try to you can slow that amygdala part of the brain down. And here's what she did, and here's what you can do. It's on the handout that's available that Rebecca passed out. D stands for dispute, debate, demystify the negative thoughts. And here's I also have bookmarks with these questions where I'm gonna be out by the sponsors table, so if you just want a free bookmark, you may have one of those if you come see me. Where's the proof? I love that one, it's kind of fun. Where's the proof that these negative thoughts are actually true and accurate? How do I know that I'm wrong and I'm gonna get called out by my boss and really lose my job? You know, this employee, I need to tell you, she was considered a high potential for her technical ability. She was highly promotable. They had her eye on her. She has actually been promoted, but they had her eye on her. So don't you think the chances of her getting called out for doing the wrong thing are probably pretty slim? But she didn't know it at the time because she was flooded. The other question you can ask, are there other explanations for what might happen? Like, what if I'm actually right? And I am going to get called out, but for the positive reason. Oh my gosh, thank you. You safeguarded the network. We're all safe. No processes shut down because you knew what to do. This question helps you become objective. What if this happened to a colleague or a friend of mine? What would I tell them to do? What advice would I give them? It kind of gets you out of your own head, and it gets you some objectivity and some distance. Has this ever happened to me before? And if it did happen to me, what did I learn last time that I could actually apply now? She could have said to herself, gosh, I was just praised by my boss 2 days ago for winning the pen testing challenge that they had. E stands for emotional effect. The emotional effect of doing this exercise is you start to slow down and think calmly. This is the key to transformation when you're in one of those upsetting circumstances. Once you calm and quiet that reptile brain, guaranteed you're going to see things much more clearly. So there's two little phrases I like to teach people, and people tell me they love this part of my presentations the most. It sounds silly, but I promise you, if you practice them, they will absolutely work. I had somebody who had a health scare about a month ago. They called me on the phone right after they'd left their doctor's office. And we went through this exercise. That person had to say it 12 times before it worked, but it successfully calmed him down. So here's the amygdala. It's screaming at you and it's firing. You want to be able to talk to it, and it just wants your attention. So you say, thank you. Because remember, it's trying to keep you alive. Thank you for sharing. I'm moving on now. Think about turning away from the fear and just moving forward. Thank you for sharing. I'm moving on now. I say this myself on days when I've got my panties in a wad because I'm anxious about something. It absolutely works, but it does take practice. It may not work the first time. Remember, it took 12 tries for the guy with the health scare. The next thing, when you are, because it's human nature. If we see somebody doing something really well and we don't have enough self-regard or confidence, we might get jealous or we might feel less than. When you see somebody doing a great job at something, if you're at all feeling that way, you can say, some of that for me too, please. And you're just saying it in your head. It's going to calm down the flooded reptile part of your brain. Some of that for me too, please, meaning, hey, that person, they just did an example of how you do a really good job. I can do that too. I can do that if they can do that. Do you see? This is about reframing and changing your thinking. What is my time left? Is it gone?
We're about 4 minutes over, but not a big deal. We can stick around for Q&A if you need to take a bathroom break before Andy comes up. Now's the time to do it. You have about 10 minutes to get back.
Okay, so remember, thank you very much. Lots of books. They are out. They'll be out there. I'm giving you a discount today. $15 instead of $16.97. You can pay by cash, check, or credit card. And if somebody would tell me, what is your one takeaway from today? What's one takeaway, your favorite thing from today? Anybody? Okay. That is deserving of a book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roberta.